Hello children. In this session, we are going to appreciate a ballad. A ballad means a long narrative poem, or it can be a long song telling us some story. And the title of the poem or ballad is A Legend of the Northland. A Legend of the Northland. Legend means an old traditional story, a famous story that is passed through the generations. So here, a legend of the Northland means a famous story of the Northland. Here, Northland does not refer to any particular country or place, but it is the region that is quite closer or nearer to North Pole area. So the region, the North Polar region is called the Northland here. As I told you, the present poem, A Legend of the Northland, is in the form of a ballad. What is a ballad? Is a song narrating a story in short stanzas. A ballad is a song or a poem that narrates a story. And usually these ballads are a part of folk culture or popular culture. And these songs or ballads are usually uh, passed on from one generation to the another generation in oral form. The best example I can give you for a ballad is our Telangana Badkamma song. If you listen to the song sung by those ladies while playing, moving around those beautifully decorated flower Badkammas, in their songs actually we have stories. And present piece of ballad, A Legend of Northland, narrates the story of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. She was a very greedy lady, and it's all about her greediness and how she angered Saint Peter. You know, Saint Peter is one of the great disciples of Jesus Christ. He is an apostle of Jesus Christ who went around the world spreading the message of Jesus Christ. So, Saint Peter is a missionary. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So, it is the introduction of the story. The first stanza of the ballad is the introduction of the story, where the story takes place far away in the Northland, in the northern polar region, where the hours of the day are few. Of course, the polar region is located in such a way that the sun rays they do not last for a longer period. We have daytime, and the North Polar region doesn't have a long day like we people have. They might be, they have just some 4 to 5 hours of daylight. So, in such Northland, where the hours of days are very short, daytime is very short, and the nights are so long in winter. Usually in the North Polar region, daytime is less and the night time is more. And especially in the winter season, we need not tell that the nights are so long that people who live in the region, when they sleep and when they wake up, they still find it is night, because we human beings need the sleep of maximum 8 hours. More than that, we can't sleep even. But in the North Polar region, as the nights are too long, especially in the winter season, people, when they wake up after an 8 hours of sleep, still they find it is night for them. That is why the last line of the stanza describes as they cannot sleep them through. And the second stanza goes like this: where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. It snows all the time, especially in winter. It snows all the time in the North Polar region, or simply let us call it in the Northland. And on snowy areas, uh, what kind of transportation we have sledges. As you can see in the picture, a family is sitting on a sledge, and the sledge is being pulled by a reindeer. Reindeers are found in very cold places or snowy areas, and they run very fast. They run very fast even in that icy region, snowy regions. So, in the Northland, where daytime is very less and where they have long nights, where they move on their sledges, which are being tied to the reindeers, swift reindeer. Swift means that runs fast, moves fast. And even children, they look like bear's cubs. Why do they look like the cubs of a bear? Because due to that coldness, children wear those woolen or furry clothes that make them look like the baby bears or the cubs of a bear. In such Northland, they tell them a curious story. I don't believe it is true. And yet, you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. The poet says, in such cold North Polar region, people who live there, they tell their children a curious story, a very interesting story. Elders, they tell their children a very interesting story, and the poet's personal opinion is that the story might not be true. Then why does he tell us? Yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. The poet says, I don't believe that the story is real one, a true story, but I want to tell it because the story has a very good lesson to learn for anyone. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, you know. So, it was the time, those were the days when Saint Peter lived on this earth, an apostle or a great disciple or follower of Jesus Christ, Saint Peter, when he roamed on this earth, preaching, talking about Christianity, spreading the message of Jesus Christ to the people across the globe, came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. So while roaming around the world, Saint Peter one day he reached the door of a cottage, a house, where in that North Polar region. And in that cottage, there lived a little woman. A very little woman was living there, and what she was doing when Saint Peter reached her door, she was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Hearth is the fireplace that we use for cooking. You can see in the picture. So, when Saint Peter, one day Saint Peter reached a hut or a cottage, there he found uh, the lady of the house making and baking some cakes. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. And what was the state of Saint Peter when he stood at that lady's door? He was almost faint. He appeared so weak because of fasting. Throughout the day, he didn't eat anything. So, at the end of the day, he became so exhausted. He was about to lose his consciousness. It's all because he needed some food. He was hungry. So he asked her, seeing a good store of cakes in her house, he asked, he asked that lady to give him a single one. Oh, kind lady, may I expect a single piece of cake from you? I'm exhausted and I'm hungry, asked Saint Peter. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. And that greedy lady, who was very selfish or greedy, she didn't give a cake taking from the stack that she was having at that time. When Saint Peter, who was suffering with a great hunger, who appeared very weak out of exhaustion, asked her a piece of cake, a single cake, she could have given immediately, taking one from the many she had at that time. But that lady, she didn't do so. Instead, she started making another cake afresh. Why do you think she was making another cake? It's not just, it's not because she had a great respect for that great man, Saint Peter, and she wanted to give a fresh one. No. She thought whatever the cakes that she had were too big, and she didn't want to give away such bigger cakes to anyone, for that matter, even to Saint Peter. So she started doing another cake in a smaller size. She took the dough and she rolled a cake and she started baking it on the hearth. While she looked at the cake, she felt, oh, even this cake also looked so big. And she didn't want to give it to Saint Peter. The reason, it appeared bigger enough not to lose. Therefore, she needed another. Then she took the flour and she started making dough to make another cake. This time she made a little more. This time she made a still smaller one, the smaller than the previous one. But it looked as large as the first had done. Even the second time, whatever the smaller cake she tried to make, she felt that was also as big as the first one. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer. But she couldn't part with that. And third time, what she did, she took very little amount of dough and then she rolled it flat. And this time it appeared, it was just as thick as a wafer we eat outside, wafers, chocolate wafers, so thin. But even that greedy lady, she was so selfish that she couldn't feel like giving it away to Saint Peter. Even though it was as thin as a wafer, her heart didn't agree to give it away to somebody. So she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. What she did finally, she didn't give any cake to Saint Peter, who was hungrily waiting there. And she said, she thought, Are, when I myself eat these cakes, they appear too small for me, but I don't know why they look so big to me when I want to give it to somebody else. So to her eyes, even the smaller one also appeared so big. Why? Because now she has to give it to somebody. If she has to eat, then they may appear very small, but now she is going to give it to Saint Peter. That's why those cakes appear too big to give away. So she couldn't give up. Finally, she didn't give any cake to Saint Peter, simply she put them on her shelf. This made Saint Peter too angry. So then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Usually, saints are very calm going people, they won't get anger, they forgive. But even such saint also was provoked by that selfishness of that lady. He was very angry with the behavior, her mentality, her attitude. And he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. Oh, selfish lady, you are too selfish. May there be selfishness in everyone on this earth, but there should be some limit to it. But you are extremely selfish and you do not deserve to live like a human being. You're too selfish to dwell, means you are not deserved. You don't deserve to live like a human being and to have good food and shelter. God has blessed you with good food and shelter, but you don't deserve that. So what did he do? Saint Peter cursed that woman. He angered on her and he cursed. What curse did he give? Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. From these lines, we understand Saint Peter, he cursed that lady, selfish lady, to become a bird. A bird's life, when compared with that of humans, is very difficult one. A bird has to go in search of food. It has to spend the whole day in search of food. At the end of the day, it would get a very small, scanty means a very small amount of food, a very little amount of food a bird would get at the end of the day. And in order to protect itself from the coldness of the winter, what the birds do? They peck with their beaks, they have to peck the trunk of a tree and inside they dwell. So, angry Peter, Saint Peter, cursed that old lady to become a bird. So, this is all the story about a selfish lady who became a good reason for the anger of Saint Peter. And what lesson we learn from this story? Being human beings, we must have some generosity. We must be ready to share a little amount of what we have to make others happy. Sharing itself is the real bliss or happiness. When we do not have heart of sharing, then we are no longer human beings. That's what the poem or a ballad, a legend of Northland. Hope you enjoyed this poem. Thank you.